Hate doing cardio? Try brushing and flossing your teeth. I'm not talking about building up a sweat. I'm talking about building a healthier mouth for a healthier heart for a healthier you. Smile Generation trusted dentists look at your care through the lens of the mouth-body connection, because what happens in the mouth plays a critical role for the rest of your body. To find a dentist near you committed to treating all of you, visit smilegeneration.com/confidence today and live longer, healthier, and happier with confidence unleashed.
So, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, as always. I'm so happy to be here with you. So it's a little bit interesting because if you have a partner, you know what I'm talking about. If you have a partner and you work from home, that it's easier sometimes to be up at the crack of dawn, so you're not interrupted while you're doing something, right? Like recording your podcast. So if I sound a little bit more like the lovely Kathleen Turner, it's because it's about 4:45 a.m. But I'm still so happy to be here with you. Today, I'd like to talk about hypnosis. And I know that I've spoken extensively about hypnosis, but maybe we should focus a little bit more on that, because we're in an era where so many of us feel like we need that extra something to help us, whether it's to reach our goals or let go of old habits or just kind of feel clearer on what we want or more relaxed or sleep better. I don't know. But many of those things will apply to many people, including me, obviously, because I'm up at 4:45 in the morning doing this. But I think it's also because sometimes the spirit just moves you, right? And it's like, all right, get up. Now's the time. So here I am with you, and I'm so happy to be with you. Of course. So today I'd like to, I don't know if I'd call this an all about hypnosis episode so much as a quick overview and reminder. And then let's talk about how hypnosis can help our minds feel better in some way, how our bodies can actually do better, because there's evidence that hypnosis can help our bodies actually heal better, right? Because our mind and our body, they're part of the same system. And one influences the other. And that kind of makes sense, right? If we have time, maybe we'll even talk a little bit about hypnosis and manifestation, because I tend to get a little new agey too. You might hear me sipping my coffee here and there, but if you have your coffee, you can do that with me. Okay. So for anyone who's new to the podcast or who could use a refresher, hypnosis is something we go in and out of naturally every day, every one of us, but it's also something that is a clinical tool. So I'll just quickly clarify the distinction between the two. But hypnosis, most people would say, is characterized by something called trance. And trance is just a state. Again, every day we move in and out of trance states all the time. Even if you think you don't, after this episode, you will realize that you do, because again, it's the way our brains are wired. And like any natural ability, and that's how I'd like you to think about it, once you know more about it and that you have it, you can decide if you want to train it to do something specific for you. And, yes, you can work with a provider to reach a certain goal, and that's clinical hypnosis. And we'll get more into that in a moment. But there's so much people can do on their own, and I think they don't really realize that. You don't have to even be an adult to do that. So the everyday trances that I've mentioned before, again, at the driving trance, party is driving the car, and the other party is back at the party, tasting the birthday cake, remembering the conversation you had, remembering the conversation as you wish it had been, or you're looking forward to something you're going to do next week, or maybe you're even kind of dreading, a presentation you have to give at work. Well, that's an everyday trance, because you're more absorbed in and focused on the movie in your mind. And you're actually also more open to hypnotic suggestions at that point, but I'll talk about that in a second. But everything else seems to kind of fall to the side, move to the periphery. So It's just the way we're wired. Now, just again, this is kind of like the Cliff Notes version of this episode, this topic today. It's the Spark Notes if you're a little younger. I guess it's the AI if you're coming up in the world now. But to summarize, you have everyday trance states that I would say are neutral, right? Your kid's playing a video game. They're lost in thought. They don't hear you when you've called them 3 times because they're so absorbed in it. That's a type of everyday trance, believe it or not. So we have to give them a little bit of a break. We have everyday trances that are wonderful. I'm not a golfer, so I'm going to totally make a mess of this, but you want to shoot a better game of golf. You want to play a better golf game. You want to make a hole-in-one, maybe. I don't know. But you're visualizing that. Everything from not only seeing yourself making the movements, the perfect swing, the excitement you feel when the ball rolls and you realize I am making a hole-in-one, right? Well, that is a very positive trance state. You're probably feeling excited, optimistic, eager to get out on the golf course again, right? So you can even have the dual experience of seeing yourself doing something and then also being in yourself in those moments. And it can actually help you perform better. It's why athletes use hypnosis and self-hypnosis or work with somebody so often, or other people use it to perform better in other ways, right? If you have stage fright, you can rehearse seeing yourself getting out on that stage and belting out that song with confidence. Barbra Streisand famously reported to have had very serious stage fright. I don't know if she used hypnosis or not, but it wouldn't surprise me. So that's something I would say a more positive type of everyday trance or deliberate trance if you're actively visualizing what you want. And when I say visualize, please keep in mind, it is a multi-sensory experience. So to use the golf analogy for a moment, you might feel your feet connecting with the earth as you walk across the green. You might feel the sun on your skin. You might smell the fall air or the springtime air, or feel the weight of your golf club in your hand. All part of the process. But there are everyday trances that I would say are pretty common, and most people don't realize that that's one way of thinking about them as they are, being really nervous, and being nervous about something that may or may not even be likely to happen. And again, if we look at the stage fright thing, if you're Barbra Streisand, there's probably nothing you could do on stage. There's probably no performance that your fans will think is bad because you're so good at what you do naturally and you're so well rehearsed, and that's not why those fans are there. But you may have fear that you'll get out there and be unable to sing. And even though the likely reality is completely different, a fear like that, an anxiety like that can be crippling. And it's why people who are trained in clinical hypnosis will often refer to things like phobias and anxiety disorders and things like that as types of trances. So my little aside here, by the way, is with any mental or physical health challenge, I'm not saying that it's all one thing. I'm not saying it's somebody's fault if they have a particular issue. I'm not saying that. I'm not ignoring the body's role, which is pretty big in how we feel and what we do and so forth. And I want to just make it clear that I'll talk about physical health issues that hypnosis can and has been helpful for briefly, just so you get a sense, the overall picture. But that does not mean, again, that sometimes things are completely caused by our minds, even in our bodies. That's the term for that is psychogenic. People often say psychosomatic. That just means that your mental state and your emotions have a role in how you feel, right? For example, if you have irritable bowel syndrome, that's considered to be a psychosomatic illness because your mind, your mental state, your emotions, your thoughts, your anxieties, that absolutely affects how your body reacts, but it's not causal. Again, psychogenic is completely different. It's your mind causes something, which can also happen. Our minds are powerful. That's my first aside. And actually, my second aside will be that if you're receiving treatment of some sort for a mental health issue or a physical health issue, please continue doing that. Discuss that with your doctor. Hypnosis, in that case, is a wonderful adjunct if it's the right thing for you. And you'll have a sense of whether it's a fit or not if you try it. But this is not to replace the other things you're doing. I just wanted to share with you what trance is, why we can change it, and how it can be helpful. Okay, so back to the trance part. So now you have a sense of how hypnotic trance states, the trance being the state, the absorption and the focus on, the moving your mind is so vivid for that time being, and you're receptive to suggestions, and hypnosis think of as a process. But often we use hypnosis to say you're in a state of hypnosis, which is trance. But you know that it can be neutral, positive, or get in the way. Now, the good thing is it's like any innate ability, because again, your brain is wired for this. Hypnosis can be something that you learn to do on your own. And you don't even necessarily need to see somebody like me or another person who's trained in clinical hypnosis. You may be somebody who goes and downloads an audio program or goes on YouTube and finds hypnotic meditation for relaxation or for sleep and finds that you get good results and you feel good. Terrific, right? You'll decide what works for you. But I want to tell you some success stories because sometimes the extreme success stories can make us remember that, well, like, hey, if somebody can get rid of their wart, that's actually a true thing with hypnosis, maybe I can be more calm when I go do this other thing, again, at work or, when I'm doing a sport or whatever. So the wart thing you're probably familiar with, you might be, but there are case reports and some research on warts because it's a commonly known thing that, number one, warts can be very hard to get rid of and keep away. I'm talking about like the plantar warts people get on their feet or a wart on their hand. And there's plenty of anecdotal evidence and case reports, again, that hypnosis, sometimes on its own and sometimes in conjunction with the conventional things like chemically burning off or surgically removing the wart, sometimes it can help the wart go away faster or stay away. It's just a commonly accepted thing. But our minds are really powerful. So all that said, nobody knows exactly what that mechanism is or why that is. Does hypnosis help your immune system? I'm going to say probably, yeah. We know that our thoughts, by the way, research even decades ago was showing this, that acute short-term stress and chronic stress absolutely affect our minds and affect our bodies. Our immune systems don't work as well. We're more vulnerable to things like colds and the flu and other infections. That's something that's very observable. By the way, the field that started looking at that, it's called psychoneuroimmunology, and it's this intersection among psychiatry, psychology, your immune function, your neurological function. How does the brain affect the body? How does the mind affect the body? How do certain practices affect the body for better or worse? How do certain emotional states affect the body for better or worse? But anyway, I'm not just saying this stuff, just so you know, if that makes you feel better to know. But absolutely, our mental states affect our bodies. Sometimes we'll know why, right? We'll secrete more stress hormones when we're stressed. Now we know that, 100 years ago we didn't. Now we just take it for granted. But sometimes the mechanisms aren't entirely clear, but we'll look at what actually happens. So a lot of you follow me because you originally learned about things like guided imagery, which in and of itself is hypnotic because it gets you immersed in that move in your mind, but it's very imagery heavy. And actually hypnosis doesn't even have to be that imagery heavy to be helpful. But they're related, so I don't want you to feel like you have to separate the two necessarily. But Belruth Naparstek is a pioneer in guided imagery. Many of you found me because I had, 12 audio meditations albums with health journeys, which Belle Ruth created. But, so grateful for that opportunity. Now her stuff and mine is all on Hay House, as you know. But Belle Ruth, if you haven't listened to her meditations, you should. A lot of them, probably the bulk, are aimed at helping people address emotional states and physical health states that need healing. And one of the great things about Belle Ruth's meditations is that people have studied them. So legitimate research teams have studied her audio programs, especially the one for successful surgery. It came out in the 90s, I think. It's still so popular because it works. If I need to do anything, even if I need to go to the dentist for something like, a root canal, which I've had, I think, 2 of over the years, I think that's worth listening to. Absolutely. It helps you get relaxed. That would be the first noticeable benefit. You feel more optimistic, but something is happening at a deeper level. And actually, the studies that have examined Belle Ruth's successful surgery tape found that surgery patients, a diverse group of surgery patients, even people having colorectal surgery, spine surgery, they had less bleeding, they had less pain, they had less need for pain medication, and things that are really important and measurable. So again, remember, these tools help us to engage the tools we're born with, right? The wiring our brain comes into this world with tools like guided imagery, like hypnosis, like other types of meditation, even mindfulness can help our bodies and minds to do and feel better. And really, that's what this podcast is all about. And it's why I'm focusing on hypnosis specifically today. Also, just as an aside, hypnosis has experienced this kind of popular renaissance, which I think is great. So if you're on Instagram or Facebook and you've seen Dr. David Spiegel talking about hypnosis, he and his father have been pioneers. His father since passed, but he's a Stanford University psychiatrist and professor and prominent researcher and clinician. And he's been on a lot of really big podcasts lately. He has a new hypnosis app. If you're not familiar with his work, it's worth checking it out. But again, maybe 100+ years of research showing hypnosis can help with different things. And again, it's because you're just learning to fine tune a tool you came into this world with. And how great is that? Most people can experience some benefit from hypnosis. We know this from the research. Most people will not have crazy side effects from hypnosis. Now, of course, if you're using some hypnosis audio program on your own and you find that you feel more anxious or it doesn't feel like a fit for you, you might want to just see a provider and maybe there is another approach that would be a better fit for you. Or maybe you need that kind of feeling of a safe container of the space of psychotherapy. That's going to be really up to you. But for most people, listening to these meditations can just be like a balm to soothe our minds. And that's my experience. I'm going to do a little digression here, and I'm going to tell you about how I got into this because it's a story some of you know, but not everybody. But long before I became certified in clinical hypnosis and started doing this with patients and so forth, I was a kid growing up in Central Jersey, and my family's family night out, not my parents going out to dinner, but taking the kids, we would go to this Chinese restaurant, the Yum Yum, in Cedar Knolls, New Jersey. It's long since gone. And it was inside this small mall. It wasn't like a giant mall, but it wasn't like a strip mall exactly. But you'd go inside the mall and there's this Yum Yum Chinese restaurant. It was nice and the food was great. They didn't take reservations. So often we would have to wait like 15 minutes, a half an hour, whatever. And there was this bookstore next door. And I've loved bookstores since I was a kid. I'm sad to see so many of them go the way of the dodo, as they say, because people order everything online, which I get. But it was nice to be able to peruse a bookstore and hold the books in your hands. If you're a book person, you know what I mean. But there was this carousel right when you walked in the bookstore. And I'm going to say the carousel was probably as tall as I am or a little taller, because I might have been like 13, 14, 15 when we would go into the bookstore, maybe even younger. It's hard to remember because it's a long time ago now, but they had these hypnosis audio tapes. And I think I was just interested in self-improvement stuff even then. and curious about new stuff. And these audio tapes were $5 each, which then was a lot of money. And, I was not employed. I was an adolescent, or young teen. But if I had birthday money or whatever, I probably wasn't the typical kid, but I would buy an audio tape. I probably only had like 3, but, they were things like sleep deeply or feel less anxious or confidence or your healthiest body. I'm making up the titles because I don't really remember them. If I ever come across these ancient audio tapes in a box, first of all, it'd be amazing to discover that they still exist somewhere. But, I would listen to them as I would fall asleep. And I don't even know if you were supposed to do it that way, but I only heard the first few minutes of what this guy was saying. The music wasn't particularly great. The hypnosis was probably pretty straightforward, but I did notice that I slept better. I felt better when I woke up in the morning. And things just started to shift for me because I was a super anxious kid and young adult. Part of that is probably, remember I was talking about everything is, it's not just, oh, you're thinking this, so it's this. It's, we're complex beings. So we are the products of our environments, of our own wiring, of things we've inherited and so forth. And I come from a long line of amped up, anxious people. So, and that's not a dig at anybody, but it's very hard to be a kid who's not anxious growing up in a super anxious, amped up household. But anyway, I found that I felt calmer despite my environment, which didn't change, despite my wiring, which didn't change, and despite not knowing really a lot about psychology. I mean, probably more than the average kid, but not as much as I know now. It made a difference. And I was fascinated by that. And over time, of course, I wanted to learn more. And I realized too that naturally the way I speak is hypnotic. And I'm telling you that because I'm going to tell you how you can change your own self-hypnosis now that you become more aware of how your own everyday trances tend to go, right? You're going to notice, are they more anxious? Are they more kind of pessimistic? Are they more excited? Do you find yourself rehearsing things that you want to do better? Well, now you can be more deliberate in making a shift, right? But anyway, so fast forward, I've learned a lot more about hypnosis since those early days. And I really do want to help not only myself, but all of you avail yourselves of a tool if you want that can help you feel better. Now, I said I was going to talk about hypnosis healing the body, and I'm going to get into that more. I mentioned the wart thing, but not everybody, probably most people aren't walking around with a plantar wart, and that's great. But so that example may not resonate as much with you. But I had Dr. Carol Janandis on the podcast a few episodes back. If you didn't hear that, you might want to check it out because she spoke about 2 pilot studies she did where people healed post-operative wounds better and healed broken bones faster with less pain, greater mobility, less need for pain medication. And literally the bones started to repair faster and better. So if you haven't checked that episode out, you may want to. She's a fascinating guest, super, super smart. And she also shares about how she used self-hypnosis to heal her own broken bone. So I'm looking at the time. I'm realizing I need to take a quick break, and I'm going to do that just for a moment. But when I come back, we'll talk a little bit more about hypnosis and self-hypnosis and how this may be able to help you. So I'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
Hate doing cardio? Try brushing and flossing your teeth. I'm not talking about building up a sweat. I'm talking about building a healthier mouth for a healthier heart, for a healthier you. Smile Generation. Trusted dentists look at your care through the lens of the mouth-body connection because what happens in the mouth plays a critical role for the rest of your body. To find a dentist near you, committed to treating all of you, visit smilegeneration.com/confidence today and live longer, healthier, and happier with confidence unleashed.
Welcome back. So happy to be back with you. But again, we're talking about hypnosis, self-hypnosis and what it can do for you. We've already talked about what hypnosis is, that enhanced state of absorption in something, focus on something, concentration, receptivity to suggestion, and decreased awareness of and absorption in everything else, right? Like the driving trance and so forth, or mentally rehearsing something you want to do. We've talked about how hypnosis can heal the body, like as in with the evidence for healing things like warts, simple thing, but bothersome, or healing broken bones, or helping you have a better surgery outcome. And there's so much more that hypnosis can do, and you're wired to do naturally. This is not a pitch for you coming to see me. This is really just because I want you to have this tool for your own use. And you may not even need to go see somebody to benefit from learning just some self-hypnosis techniques using an audio program. Again, you might find something on YouTube. So with regard to the mind thing, yes, performance, yes, reducing anxiety, visualizing a better outcome. I'm going to tell you briefly about a case I don't think I've mentioned before on the podcast. Remind me if I have, but I'm going to call this person Harry, but Harry was somebody who came to see me because he had been smoking for 50 plus years. And I'm not exaggerating. This was somebody who was an older adult, had started as a teen, and smoked 3 packs a day. I am not making that up. Now, I would never have noticed this when Harry came in because he was, he just came in, he didn't smell like smoke, which seems impossible when somebody smokes that much. But he went outside to smoke, he showered twice a day, he was impeccably groomed and dressed, and did all of these other things that were at odds with what most 3-pack-a-day smokers do. He exercised every single day with a trainer. He ate really well. He drank a ton of water. He didn't drink alcohol. So, right, there's something at odds there. And sometimes the reasons we do things, the habits we have, are for reasons that aren't completely obvious to us or even to our providers. And anyway, this was somebody who is now highly motivated to quit smoking because despite all the health behaviors, his doctor told him, your health is going to really change if you don't quit this habit. And Harry very much wanted to be there for his grandchildren. And that's a noble reason to want to be here. And plus it was at odds with the way he wanted to think of himself and present to the world. So anyway, long story short, Harry came in. Decades earlier, he had had some success with hypnosis, but it didn't last, and he wanted to try it again. So long story short, amazing hypnotic subject, amazing hypnotic aptitude, and just keep in mind that most people can make good use of hypnosis. Most people will have some ability to make use of clinical hypnosis. Not everybody. There might be like 10% of people who might be better off just using a different tool, but there's probably 10 to 15% of people who go super deep right away. You don't have to benefit from hypnosis, but they're called high hypnotizables. That's a whole other story, how you assess this. Most people are, the remaining 2/3 or so of people are somewhere in the moderate range of ability to benefit from hypnosis. But Harry right away was very deep in a hypnotic state. The first time I saw him, he was very receptive to suggestions that we had talked about ahead of times that were related to his goal. And he told me some imagery that he thought would be helpful, and it was. He left the office, and before the next session, he told me he had almost lost his desire to smoke. He came in a few more times, and then every once in a while for a booster. This was years ago. But by session 2, he'd stopped smoking. Now, that is very unusual, just so you know. Some people do respond really rapidly. He's just one of them. But it was almost miraculous because this is somebody who was smoking, remember, 3 packs a day. Most people who smoke don't smoke that much. And it's also a really expensive habit. It's kind of a miracle that he was in as good a health as he was, given that. But hypnosis can also help make clear to us, especially if we give ourselves the suggestion, like, why have I been doing this? Now, you've heard me before talk about our habits as tools because we all have habits that we pick up along the way in our lives, and they help us cope in some way. And we might be more wired for certain habits than others. So again, there's that biology coming in, or we might grow up in an environment where the habit is more commonly used as a tool for self-regulation, for feeling better or less anxious or distracting us from things we don't want to deal with and so forth. And Harry had other reasons for wanting to smoke. And it's a longer story, but Harry had a parent that was hypercritical and really wasn't supportive of the other family members. I'm just going to minimize this so I don't share too much, but this family member also happened to loathe smoking, hated it. And because Harry was very invested in being a good son, and because in those days you really couldn't talk back to your parent, the way of rebelling was to go out and do this thing that the parent hated. And it had never left him. And then over time, his unconscious came up with other reasons why he needed to keep smoking. And so in that very receptive state, one of the things, and I was very explicit when he was not in a hypnotic state, but just saying, it's okay if you want for your very wise subconscious mind to let you know whatever reasons you've been smoking, why you've needed this tool, and how you can kind of retire it. And that's exactly what happened. So that's a very extreme example. Somebody else might take longer. Somebody else might find it more beneficial, less beneficial. It's very individual. But again, most people would say that in a few sessions, you're not going to change a habit that is that deeply entrenched, that severe, that significant, especially with the whole role of nicotine addiction. But for whatever reason, it was very helpful for him. Our minds are really powerful. And it's always interesting to see how our minds will step up and help us. Now, I said I might talk about manifestation too. And there's a reason for that. One is that, you've heard me talk about manifesting being a combination of mystical, right? I do think the universe is not exactly as we're taught to imagine it. I think it is a little more malleable than we might understand. That's the spiritual part of me. But the mundane part is we need to get clear on our goals. Really hard to attract something if you don't know exactly what it is or why you want it or what it would look like. We need to be willing to make steps, right? Because if we're not willing to change anything or put some effort in, I think it's much less likely that something will come to pass that will create positive change. And as I always say, it doesn't matter to me if you think there's some mystical element or not. Doesn't matter. There are plenty of psychological reasons why changing how we think and what we focus on and what we intend and what we're willing to do will change what happens for us, regardless of what's going on in the world. And that's kind of hard to think about. But there are times when it just seems like the universe kind of steps in. So hypnosis for manifesting, I've mentioned these two things in various places, but I'm going to mention them again quickly here. One was, and this is in 2015, I thought, I really want to write a book, but I didn't even know what I wanted to write on. I had no idea how that would come to pass. And if I thought about it logically, I would have to, know what I wanted to write about, come up with a book proposal, find an agent, shop publishers, and so forth. It's a kind of a thing. And I had this kind of lightly in mind before I laid down to do this 32-minute manifesting meditation, which has some hypnotic imagery, not a ton. It uses the hemisync brainwave entrainment, which is an audio type of entrainment. You put on headphones, there's music or nature sounds or whatever. There's some hypnotic imagery. I am very hypnotically suggestible. I always go really deep. The whole midsection I don't hear. I'm in this floaty space that feels like deep sleep, but it's not. And when the suggestions come on to re-alert, I re-alert. So anyway, I have my manifesting imagery for use during deep sleep that I created probably 8 years later or 6 years later. So I was using Joe Gallenberger's manifesting meditation. Again, the track 2 is 32 minutes. That's what I used. I laid down in the middle of the day. I wasn't like clinging to this idea of writing a book. It was kind of like, oh, wouldn't it be great? Well, I don't know how to go about this. Well, okay. And then I laid down and did this manifesting meditation without necessarily thinking, oh, this is my intention for this meditation. But anyway, HemiSync, it's either HemiSync or Monroe Products that produced the Manifesting album by Joe Gallenberger, but it's still one of the ones I recommend the most. And you can get it from HemiSync. It's hemi-sync.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes. But within 2 weeks, I got contacted by not one, but two publishers. And, one was an especially great publisher. I just didn't have a sense of what I wanted to write for them. And even though that would have been probably the more kind of elite publisher, I wound up not doing that. It would have been a longer process, and I just wasn't in that space. But within 2 weeks, literally another publisher also reached out and said they wanted a book on integrated pain management, and I wrote it. But that rarely happens, right? But that does feel like the universe was like, okay, we're listening. And these opportunities popped up that honestly wouldn't have logically popped up in that way. And the second one I've spoken about before, but that's the O Magazine interview, the O Magazine feature that came as a result of the Oprah editor reaching out to me and wanting help with nail biting and saying, I'm going to come see you for a few sessions. And then regardless of how it goes, I'm going to write about the hypnosis for nail biting. And again, very successful. Within a session, her desire started to decrease and her awareness of the habit started to increase. And by the fourth session, she was able to get a manicure. Certainly, there were still times when she had an awareness of the urge to bite her nails or a few slip-ups, but it's in the January 2017 O Magazine. O Magazine is no longer published, but for a long time it was very popular, and the feature is in there. But I had been, it was like a midday thing. A lot of times I have like this midday fatigue because I'm not a great sleeper. And now for other reasons like long COVID. But anyway, back in the day, I laid down and I remember having the thought, that's all it was. Oh, wouldn't it be great if Oprah knew about my meditations and they could get to more people? Because I really do think that they're helpful. But that was it. I had not ever thought about it before then. I wasn't attached to it, wasn't this big desire. And within 2 weeks, I get this email from Melissa Goldberg at O Magazine saying, I want to come see you for hypnosis for nail biting. And the rest is history. And, I still get people who reach out to me based on that one article. It's so interesting, right? How these things unfold. But the reason I mention these things is not just to tell you about two interesting or great things that happened for me with manifesting while listening to a self-hypnotic audio program. The reason I'm mentioning it is if there's any chance that our intention shapes what happens for us. I mean, certainly on the mundane level, we know that it does, right? Because mental rehearsal can help us to do better. We can shift how our bodies feel. We can shift how our bodies heal. You now know that. What if we were to have a clear intention about how our lives would look generally, or how a relationship would look, or how our world would be? What if there's something to putting it out there? And again, that does not mean we don't work for things that are important to us. It doesn't mean that we don't get clear on our intentions in our daily lives. That's important. But what if our intention and our desire and our openness and our willingness and our natural hypnotic ability come together in some way to help shift our world or our trajectory? Please know, again, I always say this, but it's true. I am aware that our world is going through some stuff right now. I mean, there's not even a way I could adequately put it into words. It is very hard to open a social media app without feeling distressed. It is very hard right now. We're in a time when our relationships are as strained as ever. Wherever somebody is in the world, there is a way to see incredibly distressing things occurring, and maybe we're in the middle of them. So please know I am not trying to say all you have to do is listen to a meditation or go see somebody and do some hypnosis and the whole world changes. However, I don't think we have anything to lose by adding our intention, our positive intention to feel better inside, right? To do better in our own lives, but to have that positivity ripple out into the world around us, to have hope for things to be better, and to, again, to feel more confident in our working toward things being better, whatever that's going to mean for you. And I don't know what that's going to mean for you. And I don't know if most of what you're hoping to change is in your daily life. Maybe it's in navigating a relationship in a way that feels more skillful or better. And this is a tool. It's a tool in your toolbox. It is a spoke on the wheel of your life. It's not the wheel, right? And no tool is going to be the wheel. It's going to be a spoke on the wheel. But what if it means something if we have a sense of how we would like things to be better? You know, Carol Janandes went into a self-hypnotic state because she broke her toe in such a way that it was excruciating, and she had to get from the beach where she was walking with her dogs way up a hill to her car so she could drive herself home and then drive herself to the hospital. And she did it. And she had to be able to control her pain and swelling enough to do that because there was no one around to help her. And she used that same technique to heal the bones in her own foot more rapidly. She still went to the hospital, still saw the orthopedist, right? So we're not saying it's the only tool you'll use. Sometimes it might have to be because you might be in a place where there isn't something available, right? In your relationships, you're still going to have conversations with people to try and make them better. Or you're still going to decide if you're going to stay in a situation with somebody or you're going to move on. But changing the movies in our minds, having clear intention, visualizing it going well can help us to feel more confident, less anxious, clearer on what we want, and I think pull it into being more easily. It's just a thought. I wanted to share all this with you. And let me just say, how you use this tool is the right way for you. There's not, I've never believed there was one right way that works for everybody. And I think we all have a path to walk, and it's a path of discovery. We have to figure out what that's going to look like for each one of us and what's going to resonate with us. But I wanted to, again, share about this tool because it's one of the things that I found to be most enjoyable, especially powerful at shifting my own life, my own body, my own mind, my own trajectory. And I think it can be something that might work for other people as well. And that's that. So I just wanted to offer that, but it is early. I may have to have that second cup of coffee, but thank you for being with me today. I always enjoy connecting with you. I'm going to have a list of some of the things I mentioned in the podcast in the show notes. I'm also going to have a link where you can get, if you want, a free list of, I think it's like my 5 favorite hypnotic imagery programs, ones that I actually use. I didn't even talk about most of them, and maybe I'll do that more in the next episode, but you'll absolutely find a link to the HemiSync one, Manifesting by Joe Gallenberger. I don't get any commission or anything for referring you to things like that. I just want to share something that works for me. And as always, until next time, be well.